Before we bring on our guest, I want to set the rules of the road. Your own webcams and microphones have been muted, but I hope that you'll ask some questions. It is, after all, a Q&A, a discussion. So what you'll do is you'll use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There's a menu for it, and you can write your questions there. We'll be monitoring that, and providing there's enough time, we'll try to get through all of them. I'll ask the questions for our guest. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Funahashi Atsushi is one of the most exciting independent directors working in Japan right now. He went to Todai, and there he encountered an old friend of mine, Sato Makoto, who was one of his teachers there and taught film. And after Todai, he moved to New York, and this was around late 90s, 1997 or so. And he studied filmmaking at the School of Visual Arts right in New York City. And this story might sound a little bit familiar to our audience because it's very similar to that of Soda Kazuhiro, our old TVP. And in fact, Soda is sort of a senpai to Funahashi, and Funahashi-san is basically following in his footsteps. He started out making documentaries for NHK, and these were documentaries both in New York and in Japan. There's one, I've only seen one of these. It was on Ozu, and just a fantastic documentary on Ozu. And then he turned to feature films and working in the independent scene. And he's been making feature films now for about a decade or a little bit more. I want to highlight a few of these, the first being Big River from 2005, which was actually an American road movie, even set in Monument Valley of all places. As you'll probably find out from our discussion, he's a crazy cineast. So this was an interesting road movie that was very multicultural, multinational. It had a Pakistani, a Japanese, and American. It starred Odagiri Jo. Another important film he made is Cold Bloom in 2011, and this was made shortly after 3/11. It doesn't reference the disaster directly or at all, if I remember, but everyone took the film in that spirit, or understood it in that context, because it's about a love story between a widow and the man who accidentally killed her husband. So it's about a kind of accidental or sudden death, a grieving process, and struggling to look forward. And then more recently, he did a film called Lovers on the Borders, which was quite long. If I'm correct, it was actually made for streaming. So it's essentially a series, but he packaged it into a feature film as well. And this was, I have to say, one of the more ambitious Japanese films I've seen in a while. It's two revenge narratives that are intertwined. And what's kind of amazing is that one of the stories is about 3/11, although it's set in 2021, with right around the time of the Olympics and also the 10th anniversary of the earthquake. The other story is set in 1755 in Lisbon, because in 1755 in Portugal, there was a massive earthquake and a tsunami that wiped out Lisbon. So that story involved an aristocrat that had two Japanese slaves in his employ, I guess not employ. And these two narratives get intertwined in really, really complicated and amazing ways. It's not often you see Japanese filmmakers attempting to do period films outside of Japan. So I thought it was pretty breathtaking. He has a new film. It just premiered at the Tokyo Film Festival last fall, and it's called Company Retreat. And it is set in a company retreat, but it's about sexual harassment and probably the first really serious treatment of this issue since Me Too era started. On top of this, he's an author. He has 2 books on his Nuclear Nation films. They're very fascinating books, thoughtful. Instead of just like many of these filmmaker books, they just put in the script, which you can just listen to the film anyways. These are very thoughtful treatments of the production process and what he was thinking as he was making them. And then he also just released a book months ago, maybe even last month. It's he co-written with a friend of CJS, another friend of CJS, this time Yoshida Kiju, who you'll remember came here for Ozu's 100th birthday with Okada Mariko. Funahashi-san and Yoshida held a series of discussions in Tokyo several years ago now, and they were thematic. They would sit and they would just talk for like an hour or 90 minutes about all sorts of issues. I went to the one on ideology, and it was incredibly smart, fascinating discussion. This all has been converted into a book entitled Mada Minu Eiga Gengo ni Mukete, or Toward a Film Language We Have Yet to See, I guess you would translate it as. I can't wait to get my hands on this book. And I guess the last thing I'll mention is that he's very involved in an organization that I'm also take part in called Eiga Nabe, or I guess Film Hot Pot. It's a creative, technical, and labor issue-oriented group of independent filmmakers, and it just impresses upon me how Funahashi-san is an artist, but he also thinks of himself as a creative worker, and he's trying to make the Japanese film scene lively both through his practice and through his daily life. So with that, I'd like to bring on our guest for tonight, Funahashi Atsushi.
Hello.
Hello. Hey.
Hey.
Welcome
Hello,
to
everyone.
Michigan.
Hey.
Unfortunately, we can't see our audience, but if we were in Ann Arbor right now, you would be on this stage where I'm at the Michigan Theater. I'm sorry that we couldn't bring you all the way to Ann Arbor, but we will someday, for sure.
I see. I wish I were there. What time is it there?
It's 8 o'clock in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Yeah, it is 10 o'clock. I just got up and I got a nice coffee right now in my hand.
Oh, good. I'm in Colorado, where it's only 6 o'clock, but it's a very strange time, I have to say. But it also makes, it's so fantastic that we can do this. Thank you very much for participating with us. What we're going to do is start with just a discussion between the two of us for a little bit before we turn to questions in the question and answer panel. So like I said, those folks out there, there's almost 50 of you. You can hit that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and register your question. Is there anything you want to say before we start?
Yeah, actually, my picture is frozen on my phone right now. And
you look good.
Yes, I see you well. I hear you and I see you well. And as long as you hear me and then you see me well, then no problem. I just don't see myself on my phone well.
That might be okay.
All right, that's fine. Then let's let's start.
Okay, so One of the things, I mean, I was just mentioning Eiga Nabe, and one of the things that Eiga Nabe has been doing during the pandemic is a Friday night izakaya where people just come and hang out on Zoom. And one day you appeared in the izakaya actually in Yukata because it turns up you were up in Fukushima. So are you shooting a new film?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes, it is going to be a TV program first.
Oh.
And it's going to be the 10th anniversary of triple disaster and the nuclear disaster. And it's going to be the sequel of Nuclear Nation. And we know it's going to be aired on NHK on March 7th. But we don't know how we're going to put together as a film. It's going to be hour-long TV program, and I'm
Oh,
editing every day right now. It's the last moment, and this afternoon, the bunch of oji-san, all those executives from NHK will see the film, and they're gonna, I hope,
that sounds
praise.
awful.
But yeah, that sounds awful, and they're gonna
Yeah.
criticize, I'm pretty sure, and I have to defend the pictures, and they would say, okay, cut this and cut that, and I have to defend myself. So that's going to happen this afternoon. But
Wow.
that's what I'm working on right now.
Thank you for taking time out. I mean, this must be I mean, post-production is always the most busiest time, right? Appreciate you taking the time. So, when were you up in Fukushima for shooting?
Uh, I've been there like the second half of the 2020 since June, and then I've been commuting to Fukushima many times, and especially December and then January 2021. There was this the coronavirus
Yeah.
pandemic took gear here, and then we how do you say it, the Kinkyu Jitai Sengen, this emergency order
Yeah.
in Japan, and you cannot commute between the prefectures,
Oh,
and so I mean it's not really mandatory, but they say it's a very bizarre word the Japanese government use. They suggest, they
yeah.
recommend, and it's almost becomes order.
Well,
And
we're probably when you're shooting for NHK, it's like an order, I suppose.
yes, that's what the day is like. So the NHK people like, oh, they go panic. Oh my gosh, look at that, you cannot go to Fukushima anymore. So, and then luckily I was in Fukushima then when this emergency order happened. So I said, okay, then I won't go back. So I stayed in Fukushima and I kept shooting in Fukushima so that I was able to finish the film.
Well, I hope you brought your wife and your daughter amazing omiyage after that long trip.
Yeah, like I've been talking with to them like over Zoom or Line every day. So like it's
Yeah,
nowadays like it's people are so used to like talking over the the video chat.
I know. Tell us about it. We teachers are just like on it 24 hours a day, it seems. So can you bring us up to date about, I mean, what's Fukushima like right now?
Yes, it's good to start with that. You know, since this nuclear disaster, it's been 10 years, and most of the Fukushima or those it's called Keikai Kuiki, those the forbidden zone is almost cleared, except the it's called the Kikan Konnan Kuiki, the area the forbidden to enter. That's the center core, like maybe around 5 kilometers from the Fukushima Daiichi zone. And
Mm.
Futaba Machi, the Futaba city, which I've been shooting, for 10 years, and they are the center core of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. There are two cities, like Okuma and Futaba. They are located there, and they house those 6 reactors.
Yeah.
And then the center core area you cannot enter, and then so uh, it's since it's been 10 years, it's getting forgotten. Everybody forgot about the disaster. And although there are many, many people still nuclear refugees. And
Wow.
especially only Futaba city, uh, everyone, all the residents are not allowed to return yet. So they're outside of their own city, and then the compensation actually expired 6 years after the disaster in 2017.
You mean like a
So
monthly compensation?
monthly, yes, monthly compensation. So they are not getting paid, and they're out there. So they are on their own.
Wow. So Futaba is right next to the plant, right? And
Yes,
so people can go in and out of places like Namie and Soma, Minami Soma.
yes, yes, yes.
Oh,
I mean, like it's Nami and Minamsoma, like there are some areas. It's called hard to enter zone. It's called Kikan Konnankui. There is part of the Nami. It's very complicated to explain, but there are three kinds of different zones, like a hard to enter zone, and then actually the zone like you can enter during the day, and the zone you can live. And
I
then
see.
most of there are 12 prefecture, no, the city zones in Fukushima, which were affected by the disaster, and most of them, 10 of those are pretty much cleared to enter or live, and maybe uh, maybe like two of those are like Nami and Minamisoma are affected. They are still part of their cities. They have a maybe 10%, like 15% of the area are the hard to enter zone, and there are some residents who cannot live over there.
I
So
see.
it's so complicated and very
Yeah.
difficult to understand. That's why it's kind of making things difficult to understand, and so that's a part of the reason that people forget about Fukushima.
It must make it very hard to try to represent it or summarize it or even tell that story in the first place if you're doing film, especially.
Yeah, yes, and you know maybe one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is the difference between the documentary film and the journalism. The This is something I always talk about. The journalism is always try to express something above verbal, something that you can summarize with the linguistically summarize it. So like you see the headlines and the catch copies and all those,
Mhm.
all that. And then films, you try to depict something visual, non-verbal, which you cannot summarize by language. So those are two biggest differences to me. And especially 10 years after the disaster, you see the huge difference because all those the news media like always go the headlines. So okay, this is of first anniversary, second anniversary, or this is the compensation is like this much or that. So they go maybe right after the disaster, they talk about the disaster every day. Then after 2 months, like it's maybe like once in 5 day, and in a year later they talk in like once in 1 month, one day. Then 10 years later, nobody talks about it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and so and documentary film, I think we I feel I'm responsible to depict between those headlines, the between those the big days, those like man, the days like so nothing going on. But that's the I think gravity of pain. I think I can depict by the documentary films because that's those are the people, refugee people. They are still out of their home and cannot go back, and that's something I felt that I should depict by using film media.
If you're doing work, I mean, Nuclear Nation and its sequel were independent films, right?
Yes.
And your producer is like one of the biggies, and she does a lot for TV, but a lot of independent film too. I mean, you must have been quite free to do what you wanted and make the choices you wanted. But working for NHK must bring the film part and the journalism part into quite some tension, no?
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
Are you?
That's the struggle I'm having exactly. Nuclear Nation and Nuclear Nation 2, the films you saw, I didn't use any narrations, the
Yes.
voiceovers,
Yeah.
but uh,
There's a kind of
this,
direct cinema, close to
yes,
Soda,
yeah,
except for intertitles.
yes.
Yeah.
I try not to use the intertitles at the beginning too,
Yeah.
but there are so many things you have to understand regarding this evacuation, the nuclear disaster, especially those radiation you cannot see,
Yeah.
but you can say like there's something in the air. It was very difficult to depict.
Yes.
So I decided I have to explain something, and this is the area that they can enter. This is the area they can live, and so that. So I use these intertitles, which just the text on the black background.
Yeah.
And this time, especially especially for TV program which was aired in 2012 or 2013 in the United States on, I think it was a PBS or something, and also in France or Germany, like we made a TV version.
Oh.
It was 52 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to use the voiceover
Oh.
because all those producers in the States or in France, they complain.
Even in
They cannot,
France.
yeah, they cannot bear the reading all those sentences between the pictures. So
Well, and it's just the power of convention and their expectations,
yeah.
You, when Soda was in Ann Arbor shooting the big house, um,
Mhm.
he had a camera crew around him. Well, one person doing a TV program on the production. And
Ah,
their ambition was to do direct cinema just like Soda. So you'd have a direct cinema film about a direct cinema filmmaker. And
uh-huh.
TV the TV station absolutely refused to have a film without narration. Impossible. Impossible.
and and what happened?
They had to add narration, and then they took it off and they made their own version. Nothing ever
Oh,
happened to it. But
I
so
see.
this current one, though, it will be Nuclear Nation 3. You're going to re-edit it for theatrical.
I'm hoping so. Like, I'm talking with my producer. Her name is Yoshiko Hashimoto, and we are now making the TV version first.
Uh,
And we are fighting that whether or not actually to have narration.
oh yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, and this time I also feel that like there are lots of information I have to tell. So if we invent some way to explain those, then I think I'd love to go without narration. But otherwise, then I'm gonna be persuaded by NHK.
Mhm. So I want to ask you a little bit about cinematography.
Mhm.
Um, the first of all, I mean, I want to start by apologizing to both you and our audience because Alexander Street Press has been streaming it in a very bad quality version. It's stretched, it's at very low resolution. I feel really bad about that, but we just acquired it for Canopy 2, and I checked that this afternoon. And if you haven't seen the film yet, watch it on Canopy. There's a link that just went out for those of you on U of M. And can you put the link to his Vimeo page too? Because you can, if you don't have a U of M login, you can watch the film through Funahashi-san's own Vimeo account through pay-per-view. There you go. And this is really high quality. They're beautiful films, actually, these documentaries. And I noticed that in the credits, you had Yamazaki Yutaka and Tamura Masaki, who are two of the giants of post-war cinematography. And in fact, I think our audience had, just before the pandemic, had been enjoying a whole series for CJS on Japanese cinematographers. And two of our cinematographers were Yamazaki and Tamura. Did they do much work on this film? What was it like working with them?
They shot maybe the 10% of the film for each. So 10% Yamazaki-san and 10% Tamura-san. And since all those people part in refugee camp, I shot by myself because I was the one making a relationship with the subjects.
Oh, yeah.
So all other parts like the big event or some scenery shots in the Fukushima, and some parts like we know what we are trying to shoot, and you don't need to make relationship with the subject. Then those are the time like the Yamazaki-san or Tamura-san join in and then shot for me. So I was the one behind the camera, but actually I couldn't tell them what to do. Actually, they are the giants. So I was like, okay, you do whatever you want to do, and then
Yeah, that could be
actually,
intimidating.
yeah, no, it was not intimidating, but I learned a lot. It's especially the Tamura-san. It's
Yeah.
I like him a lot because he shot by the way, he shot my Ozu documentary, and
He
he was
did.
yes, he was the one.
Oh,
Yes, he was
yeah,
the
that
one.
looked good too.
Yes, I really like him a lot. It's one thing he's great about is he's really what he's seeing is always something nonverbal. It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
cinematic. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what I say. It doesn't matter all the information what the media says. Actually, like when we went to the shoot this refugee shelter, it's called the Kisai Koko, the Kisai High School in Saitama Prefecture.
Yes.
I with Tamura-san and the one assistant, so three of us. There are just only three of us, and then we went there. And I thought, okay, I have to tell him where it is, what kind of people there, and then what kind of a situation they are in. They are out from their Futaba machi, and then they get compensated this much, and then this kind of life they are doing. And he wasn't listening at all. Actually, he didn't care. He didn't care really, and then he just sees what's going on, and he just observe, and he
Yeah.
try to understand from what he sees. So he try. Actually, it's almost as if he try not to be affected by what I said or all those preconception.
Interesting.
So yes, so he just see the energy, what's going on in front of him, and try to understand and then try to capture the essence of life.
Well,
That
this
was
is the
amazing for me. Yeah, that was
yeah.
the cinema lesson for me. And so I
Yeah.
was like, so in the middle of the shoot, I just shut up.
So Tamura, for those of you who don't know, we did all of the Ogawa Productions films. We've shown a whole series of Ogawa films in the past. And in the series before the pandemic, we showed Lady Snowblood from him. And then we haven't done Yamazaki yet. We hope to return to that series when the pandemic ends. But Yamazaki is Koreeda's cinematographer, but also does a lot of TV. Along these lines, I want to ask you about the experience of shooting the disaster. You mentioned how one challenge is to shoot something that you can't see, which is the Fukushima piece of this disaster. But there's also the tsunami, which is radically spectacular. And one of the common experiences, are you still with me? Okay. One of the common experiences of documentary filmmakers, whether it's in a massive historical event or a very traumatic personal event or something very individual, is connected to an idea in documentary. We often use the word magnitude. The magnitude of history is so much bigger than the cinematic frame, you know? And so the challenge for a filmmaker is like, how do you use the tools of cinema to vivify, give life to the film, and even hint at the magnitude of what you were experiencing in real life with your camera? You see, so when you walked out into the tsunami area for the first time, I mean, I went maybe 1 year after, maybe no, 8 or 9 months after the event. It was beyond any framework I had to understand it. And if I had to try to represent it in film, I'm not sure how I would do it. So can you bring yourself back to encountering the tsunami zone the first time and shooting it? And what did you feel you had to do, or what was your ambition then?
Um,
How did you communicate?
yes, when I first went there, it was maybe towards the end of March 2011. Then in April, I went there a couple of times too. And then, as you may know, it was a huge disaster. Everything was destroyed, and all the ships everywhere on the ground, and sometimes on the building.
Yeah.
So it was incredible. And then, I was shooting everywhere, and I remember the smell. It was very difficult. And, I remember uh, how do you say samba, the swordfish, the very thin fish, like it's huge.
It's like a pike, we say, or
The pike.
sanma.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's maybe thousands of the samba on the ground and on the building, and then rotten. And a month after, and it was incredible, disturbing smell. And then I imagined that there are lots of other animals got killed, and also humans, of course. And it was something, as you say, like it's beyond any framework, or beyond my imagination, so I couldn't figure out what to do with it. I asked myself if I have any, I am entitled to film anything here, or maybe not, because I'm outside.
Yeah.
I'm just peeking this disaster. And then, so I knew many crew were there, like many camera crew, like it's from the television, the films, and I know at least 10 filmmakers who are there and shooting something. And then when I saw the films, post March 11 films later on, common method they chose to film is to show the massive disaster. They do this traveling shot.
That's
Like
right.
you put the camera in the car, and then you just go, you drive, and then you shoot this.
Or even a
And
bicycle.
yes, on the bicycle, and you
Anything.
can show this massiveness. And look, this is a huge disaster. And then actually back then, like the drone was not really available much. There's a
Oh,
very
that's
super
right.
expensive
Yeah.
back then. So like they were not shooting the drone yet, but maybe like it would happen now. Then I'm sure like they would choose to shoot with drone. And
Yes.
so, but there's a very weird feeling I had in my mind that it's, I felt am I entitled to film this disaster?
Mhm.
But you see the death of many people here, and then shoot this with a camera sticking out of the windows of your car and the traveling and show, hey, look, is something unethical.
And unethical.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I felt.
I I I haven't written about this yet, but I started doing the research to write about 311 films, and so I've seen over 300 311 films, um, and I would say 97% of them have that traveling shot,
Yeah.
almost all out of a
Be-
car, um, one or two on bicycles, and a few walking, but actually, no, not much walking. It's usually just endless shots out the window.
because the such that's something like the direct reaction to the site. Like you try to capture everything. That's the I think a very you know the direct first uh, reaction to the
Yeah,
what you see. And the
yeah,
first thing I did, I thought was that um, all the crew are out there, and the TV crew and the film crew over there. And then I thought maybe I should do something different also. So the one thing like is this ethical question, and the second thing is that everybody is doing the same thing.
yeah, yeah,
So I thought, okay, I have to think about it, and I have to choose a different approach. So I went back home in Tokyo. Then I was figuring out what to do. Then I heard the news end of March that those townspeople of Fukushima, the Futaba, went to this abandoned high school in Saitama Prefecture, and they are the people evacuated furthermost out of Fukushima. In fact, all those the small cities and the villages in Fukushima evacuated right outside of this evacuation zone, which were 20-kilometer radius. And so like, they just went to west in Fukushima,
hmm,
and they stayed in the Fukushima prefecture. It's like the maybe like you stayed in Illinois out of Chicago, but it's
yeah,
just outside of outskirts of Chicago or something like that.
hmm,
But they are like they went to California or something to me.
yeah,
Like they really went far, and I thought it was a very interesting choice, and I thought it was the right choice actually, because we don't know what's going on in this disaster zone and this power plants. Actually, the power plants exploded, and they didn't know. Japanese government and the TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, didn't know how to, uh, uh, how to do anything. Actually, so they were actually, if you remember, it's one of the stupid this thing the TEPCO did was that they know they have to cool down the reactor, but you
yeah,
cannot go inside there because it's such high radiation. So they went into the helicopter, then they put the water over sky, and I was watching on the news, and there's the wind blowing, and the water went and
yeah,
and so they put even the water over the reactor. Then I was like, oh no, it's so it shows they really don't know what they're doing,
yeah,
and it's gonna take a while. I felt, and then I thought, okay, maybe uh, I want to film them because this townspeople of Futaba, they evacuated to this abandoned high school in Saitama. They are the people who evacuated the farthermost. And
Yeah.
the reason was that there should be some microcosm inside this high school. And they made a town hall in this high school, and they have everything there.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe it could be a very interesting approach that only shoot there.
Hmm.
Because anyway, you cannot go inside the evacuation zone, or you cannot go inside the nuclear power plant because you'll be dead. So why don't we shoot the Fukushima documentary without going Fukushima? That
Yeah.
was the concept I thought about it. So why don't we just focusing on townspeople of Futaba, and then we can depict the impossibility of going back.
Yes. But you do go to the zone too. And
So
you do
yeah,
use
that was the
you do use a moving camera too.
yes, yes. That's the next step
Ah,
theme I want to talk about.
okay.
So that was the first decision I made. It was back in April,
Uh-huh.
and then all those media was saying that okay, you cannot enter the zone at least a year or two. So I
Yeah.
thought, okay, then I will be shooting in Saitama
Mm-hmm.
in the high school, and I was telling myself and the producer that okay, I'm not going anywhere. Like I'm gonna just stay inside the high school and try to observe everything what's going on. Then things changed.
Mm.
In June, 3 months later, government said, okay, you can enter the zone for 2 hours, just 2 hours, and get things you need. And you can go home and for 2 hours with these type suits and white suits, and then you go back there. So that's a new thing came up.
Wow.
And all those Futaba people start talking about, okay, when are you going to go back? And then you're going to get things. And what do you need? Okay, I have to get my jacket, or I have to get my money, or they start
Yeah.
talking about it. And
Imagine.
I've been shooting them in high school. And then I was talking to myself, okay, but I have to stay in high school. I should not go back to Fukushima.
Like a
And then,
rule.
yeah, it was like, cool. Then I kept shooting every day in high school. But then when the day comes, they start getting on the bus and leaving the high school. Uh, I was shooting there, and I was thinking like I'm gonna just let the bus go outside the high school, and that's up to where I shoot, and I stopped shooting there. But I found myself actually in the bus instead.
Oh. Oh.
I couldn't resist myself because it sounds so interesting what they're talking about, and I just couldn't resist. So I jumped on the bus and I just went with them
I
because
didn't know that.
I
Wow.
yeah. so so and then you know because I mean this is justification I thought about later on. It was very how to say the more like intuitive reaction to the as a filmmaker. I think I have to jump on here and I have to be with them. So like I tried to be with them together, and then I jumped on the bus and they went to the Fukushima back together, and they were like, okay, I never be back to my home for 3 months. And then especially there's the man Nakai-san. He lost his mom by tsunami
Yes.
disaster,
Yes.
and then the it's a it he went his home from work, and right after the tsunami, and then his house was by the sea, so
Yeah.
his house was completely wiped off by the wave, and then that's where his mom was there, and then he tries to go there, but then it was already blocked, uh, not because of the disaster. I'm talking about the March 11. So I'm talking about the night of March 11, and then it was
Oh.
yet the disaster, nuclear disaster happened. But there's a huge magnitude of tsunami, so people were not entered to the tsunami zone.
Mm.
So he was blocked, and then he stayed just in the elementary school. That was the evacuation center in the Futaba, and he stayed overnight there. And then people are talking about the 6 o'clock in the morning of March 12th. They're gonna start looking for people. As soon as the sun rises, they go there and they start looking for them people.
Yeah.
And he was expected to look for his mom. Maybe at least it was very cold, but maybe next day she might make it.
Yeah.
Then, but like a 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning in the March 12th, there's the pressure in the reactors went really high up. And then the government and TEPCO ordered the evacuation around 6 o'clock. So they halted those search. So he was forced to evacuate without looking for his mom.
Yeah.
And then a month later, his mom was found dead. So he was the one, he really hated this disaster, nuclear disaster, because without a disaster, he went there as soon as the morning search started. Like he went there. He wanted to join the search group.
Yeah.
And then so I was with him in the high school, and he's getting on the bus, and then I couldn't resist. I had to go with him, and I jumped on the bus with him and then went to the Fukushima. So, it's the justification I have right now is that it's maybe because the film becomes through their point of view.
Yes,
To
that's
Fukushima.
exactly it. Yeah. And
So
in
it's
fact,
not like me. Yeah. It's not
when
me
you're
just
shooting,
panning. Yeah.
exactly. When the other people are going in their own cars or vehicles and shooting out the window. When I saw Nuclear Nation, I was blown away because when you shoot through the window, you see the victims at the window looking out. So it really was from their point of view. And then the other one there's the handheld stuff that I guess Nakai shot himself.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Nakai-san's, yes. Yeah.
So that's like the heart and soul of the film in a sense, because suddenly the victim actually has a camera too, and the camera's trembling. It's so powerful. And then the last one that struck me was looking out the back of the bus as you're leaving town. Oh, I mean, this is moving camera that links the camera to these people's point of view. And that was the missing piece for all of the 311 films, I think. It was broken. There's a link broken that I think you discovered.
Yeah. That was intuitive reaction when I jumped onto the bus, but later on I found that at least I can just justify myself to use the pictures of Fukushima because it's their point of view. And then actually, like when I went to this bus center right outside of the evacuation zone with all those Futaba people, including Nakai-san and other people, I wasn't allowed to enter because I'm not a resident of Futaba. So
I was wondering about that.
Yes, I got on the bus from Saitama, this high school. Saitama is this high school is 200 kilometers away from Fukushima.
Yeah.
So I could get on the bus from Saitama to Fukushima's bus center. And there's another bus center outside the exclusion zone, that outside of the 20-kilometer radius, and then where they changed to a Tyvek suit. And then they have to leave their stuff there, and they have to minimize the stuff that they bring in there. And you are given 2 garbage bags. Up to 2 garbage bags, you can put the stuff in whatever you want inside the garbage bags.
Wow.
That's it. So they put whatever they want to put inside the garbage bags, and then you have to double them up. Actually, there were the loop inside the black and outside the transparent. And when they out of the evacuation zone, then they lip off the outside of transparent one, and you can bring back home the black
Wow. It's just otherworldly.
one. Yes.
There's one other thing I want to mention that I noticed, and then we'll turn to the questions from some people. And that's, I doubt this has occurred to you, but it has to do with that issue of magnitude again, and what filmmakers do to express just the magnitude of history. If the moving camera is the typical one strategy for 311 filmmakers, it was totally different in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are no trucking shots from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but there are all these panning shots. So instead of moving through, it's a point, like the epicenter. And I also noticed that in your film, there's a pan. It's very unusual in these 311 films, very unusual. But there's a pan and then a tilt, and then you see it's the plant. This was very powerful for me because, again, this disaster has an epicenter, and then it has unfathomably huge tsunami zone, and then it has a point again, another epicenter essentially. And it was interesting that since your film is tied so deeply to Fukushima, you made that choice to do a pan.
I see. I'm not sure like I can explain well, but what I felt when I was shooting that pan was that you wanna stay with the people of Futaba, their point of view. So you have to show the distance between where you are and what you see.
Yeah.
So you cannot really like drive it, and you can just show everything really lightly. You want to show where you stand, what do you see in front of your eye, then what do you see maybe 20 meters from you, then far away, then you see
the problem.
Problem or pipeline
Yeah.
or the disaster zone. So I think
Yeah.
you want to engage yourself and the viewer actually with the disaster. So
Yeah.
engaging a view, you have to create with the camera.
So
yeah.
let me take a question from Ethan Siegel, who's up in Lansing, north of us. He says, I just want to say that I really admire your work in Nuclear Nation. For me, one of the most powerful scenes is the one in which Kaeda makes an apology to the mayors, but then immediately leaves. Same thing for Hosono. They clearly don't care. Can you tell us anything further about some of the people you introduce in the film, such as Nakai Yuichi and Suzuki Shizuo?
Okay, so two questions that he's talking about, right? Yes. So when you are shooting this documentary of this much magnitude, it's you are learning every day, and especially like I stayed with this. I decided to stay with this small town in Futaba in high school, and then after the 3 months or 4 months passed, I decided to go outside of the high school. As long as new rule is that as long as I stay with them, I can go. You cannot go. I cannot go with my freely without them. I have to stay with them. So I was sticking around with this mayor of Futaba, and he was talking to me, eating lunch. And okay, today I'm going to Tokyo. Oh, okay, you're going to Tokyo? Can I go with you? And then I jumped. We took a train together. So like it's a very small town, and then and actually he's not paid well at all. And the mayors, actually, those are small municipalities in Japan. Mayors are not paid well. That's another problem here. But so and so that's why there's not so many the mayor, the people who want to become they want to work for the cities. But anyway, so we took a train and went to Tokyo, and then he went to this gathering of all other nuclear power plants hosting towns, and it was phenomenal. It was very interesting gathering meetings. They are discuss. I was expecting, okay, they would discuss about this March 11 and the nuclear disaster, and maybe since this Fukushima happened, how we can shift to next step, and which is maybe the renewable energy, and we have to stay away from this nuclear. That's what I was expecting. Instead, they start talking about how they can protect the nuclear power plants, the other power plants they have, and minimize the Fukushima magnitude so they can forget about it.
Yeah.
And I was with this mayor, the Idogawa-san. He just shut up and he can't say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I could feel how sorry he was, and how angry he was feeling, and it was very interesting for me too as a filmmaker that it's such huge gap that he's feeling this other people don't care about what's going on in the Fukushima, and especially as you said, this person who questioned said this all those the executives from the governments actually they were doing what they were doing every day, which is like they say it's very strange custom in Japan that those big shot say hi and then say, okay, welcome, and thank you so much for coming over, and we're going to keep discussing this matter, and we'll be fine. Thank you. And he leaves.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Abayo.
it's a gesture. Yeah, it's a gesture that I don't care.
Yes, I know. It's shocking. It's
Yes,
totally shocking.
yes, but it's happening now too. Like I mean, like it's a kind of custom. Whatever good. That's why, the exact reason why the Japanese all those government people or politicians cannot speak without papers, without looking at the papers in their hands, because all those
Yeah.
people and assistants are like making those papers, and he cannot talk because he's not doing his own homework. He's not doing his research.
We have versions of those politicians too, during this Texas disaster last week, the Texas senator went to Cancun. So here's another question for you. I know. From Ryan, I imagine you've watched many films about Chernobyl, and maybe you have been. Do you have any thoughts about how Fukushima and Chernobyl compare as places or as cinematic subjects?
It's I don't know what to say about it. I've seen many Chernobyl films too, the documentaries mainly, and also the Netflix came out with this huge series of Chernobyl.
It's a great series.
It's a great series too. It's phenomenal. I loved it. It might be a little different from what you expect, but it's one thing I can say about the Chernobyl is that Japan didn't learn anything from Chernobyl. That's the problem of Fukushima.
Interesting.
Because we knew back then, 2011, we knew it's gonna take a long time to resolve this disaster from Chernobyl, and then we knew that you cannot enter there. So you have to have the plan that like how you're gonna handle those people who were living there. So you have to make new town for them. That's what the former Soviet Union did for
Yeah.
Chernobyl people. And Japan didn't do it, actually.
Mm.
Instead, they tried to force people go back there. That's really brutal. And what they did was that actually the world standard of this radiation exposure is that it's said it's maybe at max you can expose up to 1 millisievert per year. That's the dose, maximum dose of radiation. It's called IPRA.
Hmm.
They set up this standard. And then Chernobyl, during the Chernobyl disaster, Soviet Union set it up to 5 millisievert per year. So they brought up because that they didn't want to follow this strict rule. And then when this Fukushima disaster happened, Japan even brought it up to 20 millisievert per year. So
Oh,
to minimize the evacuation zone. So and
yeah.
then what happened was that of course there are many smart people and stupid people in Japan, but there are smart people look at all those worldwide standard, which is 1 millisievert per year, and then you ask questions why you say 20 millisievert. So because you have they get it. They get it. The government tried to minimize it and then tried to minimize the disaster, the cost
Yeah.
actually. So then they choose, okay, I stay away. So many people stayed away out of the Fukushima. So actually, that made that created a huge gap between the people who chose to stay out of Fukushima and they try to go back into the Fukushima. And
Oh,
that's what I try to depict in Nuclear Nation 2.
I see.
It's about the disparity, uh, the people who are torn between the Fukushima and outside of Fukushima. So
Mm.
that I think that's one thing that I can talk about this. When the government tried to prioritize the economy or the money over the people's lives, that's
Yeah.
what happens.
I there is one great Chernobyl documentary by Japanese filmmaker. I don't have you seen I'm not sure what the title is. It might be Mono Taberu Hitobito or something like that by Fukasaku Kinji.
Yes, I know
I
what it is,
did.
but I didn't see it.
Yeah, he does these Yakuza films and Battle Royale. And it's this, there's unforgettable stuff in there. Like they start in Moscow and they talk to these scientists who say the mushrooms are the plants that absorb all the electric radioactivity. And then they go into the exclusion zone and they bump into this old couple that refuse to leave. And they sit down to vodka and pickled mushrooms. And the Japanese are sitting there at the table looking at the mushrooms and just, do they eat it or not? And they eat it.
Oh my
But
gosh.
it's, yeah, I know, it's this human connection and taking risk, which was really profound. I'll also mention that the Chinese director Zhao Liang, who did Petition, has been running around with a red camera in Fukushima and Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. And he's doing what sounds to be an amazing film about the three places. Should be out next year. Um,
Wow.
let's.
I'm a big fan of Zhao Liang. Like it's a great
It's.
filmmaker.
I've seen
Yeah.
the Chernobyl part. It's amazing. It's very quiet and eerie and amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to see how he does Fukushima. Let's take another question here. Um, This is from Unsang Kim, who teaches film with me here at Michigan. And he is really impressed by the way you've shot the residents, but particularly this emotionally overwhelming scene when they actually visit the devastated village. And for instance, he says, Yuichi, who has been surprisingly calm, kept his tears back before, suddenly became very emotional and even yelled at his father, warning him not to touch anything. Did you anticipate this when you asked them to shoot the village? Did you give them any kind of directions about what to do with their camera?
Actually, that's what I was gonna explain. Maybe after maybe talking to you about this other topic. This Yuichi, like, we went to this bath center outside of the exclusion zone, 20-kilometer radius, right? And then his father and the Yuichi got on the bus, and then I wasn't able to go in. I wasn't allowed to enter, and then I was carrying the backup camera, little one, very small one, like this much.
Yep.
And then I asked the Yuichi. I mean, like, you cannot force them to film. And I was chatting with the Yuichi that, okay, what are you gonna do? Are you filming something? Are you recording something? And he said, oh, I wasn't thinking about it, but maybe I should, because this is the first time I go back. And then I got the smartphone, but this my storage is full. I cannot record anything.
Mm-hmm.
You wanna use mine? And oh, can I? And yeah, sure. Because this is a little one. Why don't you just record it, and then maybe later on, if I can share this one, like, that'll be great. And he said, fine. Because you cannot enter with me. And he was actually, he was feeling sorry that I cannot enter with him.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, I can shoot. Then, so only thing I asked him was that, I got a huge SD card. This is a 128 gigabyte, and you can shoot anything. So you turn on the camera and do not stop it.
Yeah.
You are allowed to the film 2 hours. I mean,
Yeah.
and enter 2 hours the zone, and then so you can shoot actually with this card, like, 6 hours, so you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And he said, fine. So he recorded everything, and
Wow.
when I saw it, like, it was really, I was so shocked, and all the voice and everything is recorded. And so I didn't tell him, to answer the question, I didn't tell him what to shoot, but so that, like, he was actually try to shoot what he's seeing. That's what
Here's Okazaki-san has a question, actually a bunch of questions about the current situation, but here's one that I think would be interesting to hear you talk about. He says, I heard that some people receiving huge amounts of money from TEPCO make people outside of Fukushima come to hate these people. Are usual residents unable to receive enough compensation from the government or from TEPCO?
Okay.
You know anything about that?
I don't think so. I don't think that's what's happening actually. I think it's just a rumor. I've been with them, and I've been looking at all those paperwork. Actually, I even sometimes help them to fill out the forms.
Oh.
They say, oh, I cannot look at them, and then, okay, can you fill out? And then, okay, what's your yearly income? Okay, this much. Okay, I write it down. And I sometimes help them to fill out those forms for the compensation. And I know how much they are getting paid. And it's, as you may know, the Japanese culture, the office culture is so, rigid. No, walk around, there's nothing ambiguous, very rigid office work culture. So you get what you lose. You don't really get paid a lot. It's like, if you lose a house, then you're gonna get compensated how the how much the value of the house. If you are living in an old house, then you get paid for the old house, not that much. And then actually, I think from my point of view, they paid less because that was a huge problem that regarding this compensation, because TEPCO based on the value after the March 11, whatever the real estate
After
or
the
the land.
disaster.
Yes. So the land value went so down, and they say, okay, we just based on the current value of the land or the real estate you have, and then what do you mean? Like it went
Yeah.
half of the price, and so it became huge commotion. Yeah. So I don't think they get paid okay well. So for the people who fought their way out, they get compensated enough. I think maybe just to restart their life again. But I think it is rumor that they paid very well. I think.
So we have one last question, then we'll let you go off to NHK and have fun with the bureaucrats.
Okay.
Where can we see more of your films? We don't have them
Yes.
in our library right now, but I know some of them were available on Netflix for a while, right?
Yes. I think it's actually yesterday I was complaining to the producer of my Lovers on Borders film that it is available in Japan, but it's not available on Netflix or not on Amazon even. And then they say they are working on it, so they are trying to make it available on iTunes and Netflix and Amazon as soon as possible. And also the company Retreat, this new film I made, it's kind of docu-fiction about this sexual harassment and masculine culture of Japanese office. It's gonna be out in theaters in Japan towards the end of this year, and I'm hoping going to the States or everywhere, maybe next year. That's after 2022.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
I hope people can watch more of your work. We'll bring you back and we'll show at least something else. And
Also,
there's
like
the
I forgot to show.
Yoshida
Yes.
book. Let's see it.
Yes.
Is that a Sugimoto photo on the cover?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
He has a
This
whole
is
series of film theater images where they, let the image go until it just turns white. Lovely.
Yes. This
See
is a huge thing. Like I've been working on this for 5 years with Yoshida, and then yes, it is a huge book about this about the film language we have yet to see, as you translated it right. I think it's we discussed about the things we can depict using film media and things we cannot depict beyond representation of film media. That's what we discussed, and so it was very interesting for me. And because he's like a 41-year older than me, and
I know.
the Yoshida knows a lot, so it was very interesting. I don't know if you may know that I had another book about Frederick Wiseman.
Oh yes, it's like it's the biggest book on Wiseman in the world, I'm sure.
Yes, yes.
It's a brick.
And yes, it's a brick. Like you can kill people with the book.
Yes.
I stayed with the Fred in Boston for 4 days, staying in his editing room in front of Steinbeck and asking him every film he made. And then I interviewed him, and then that became a book. And then that was a great experience. But this Yoshida book was a really phenomenal experience for me too.
I'll take Yoshida over Wiseman any day. So I noticed that Amazon Prime has Cold Bloom So anyone who wants to rent that film, it's available, or it's on Prime, so you could just go and watch it. It's a really excellent feature film by Funahashi Atsushi. Thank you so much for coming. This has really been fantastic. And I'm seeing in the Q&As, people are starting to thank you too. I'm sure there's 45 people out there clapping like crazy. We're so appreciative that you can come. Next time we'll do it in person.
Okay.
All right.
I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. See you later.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.